Welcome to Satsang. Such a joy to be together with you all. So taking up first one of the questions that's come in from our global family joining us from all over the world via the internet. And then I'll open it up to any questions that anyone here has. How can we shift our path in life with the most grace and ease? If we are shifting our path in a way that is in alignment with our Dharma, the will of the divine, we say, thy will be done. Well, there will always be grace. We don't have to bring that grace. The grace is there. The grace is that which is giving us the vision and the direction to shift. The grace is that which is pervading us, filling us, guiding us. Now, I use grace here in a kind of very broad definition way. To me, I should define what I even mean by grace, because it might be different from what the questioner meant. When I speak about grace, I speak about it as that divine presence in the universe that's infinite, omnipresent, everywhere, formless, but can take lots of forms, can take any form. So I think of grace when I think of the way that flowers know how to open their petals when the sun shines on them. I think of grace when you see fruit that blossoms on the end of trees. I think of grace when you see babies being born, when you see sunsets rising, when you see people in the world stepping into courage, stepping into truth, stepping onto a path. I think of grace when I think of the presence into which we dive and connect to remind us who we are. That to which we say thank you before we eat, before we drink, in the arti, when we wake up. That which really fills our life. So to me, that's grace. Now, when the questioner says, how do we do this with grace? Maybe they just mean in a nice way. Because, sometimes people say, oh, she's very graceful. And really what it just means is like you don't knock things over as you walk through the road. If you stumbled and tripped on the table, nobody would say, oh, that was very graceful. If you're able to manage to get out of your commitments or engagements without anybody feeling badly, people would say, she managed to cancel that very gracefully. Like she got out of it, but nobody felt hurt or badly. So if that's all you mean, then you're thinking too small. It's a nice definition, but it's small. Grace is so much more than that. Grace brings all of that, but grace transcends all of that. And grace is still there even if you trip over the table. It's not that which is so fleeting or shallow that if you knock over a glass or trip on a table or do something that is undeniably clumsy, it doesn't mean that there isn't grace in the moment. So when I think about shifting our path with grace and ease, as they asked, you would only shift your path if there was an experience from grace, an inner experience, a knowing, an intuition that led you to shift. When I think about trees, this is my favorite example. I'm a nature person, I'm a mountain person, I'm a tree person. And trees tend to grow up. It's the way they grow. Look around, every tree grows up. But every once in a while you see a tree growing sideways. Now she does that not just because she's a rebel or some kind of mutant, but actually for a very brilliant reason. Trees need sunlight. They get their energy through photosynthesis, through the light of the sun, quite literally. They take that light and they turn it into energy. On some level that I don't have the scientific background to know, that tree, as she's coming up out of the ground, knows intuitively that somehow if I grow 7 feet vertical, there's not going to be sunlight. There's too many other trees. The canopy is too thick. And so instead, she grows horizontally to a spot where more light will shine on her. Now, she only does that when there is some kind of a sign, a signal, an intuition, an intelligence to make her do that. It's not a genetic malfunction. And so the same thing in our lives. We should only change course, shift, make big shifts when there's a calling to do so. A lot of us have a disease. We are addicted to drama. And I say this as someone who suffered from the disease. We are addicted to the ups and downs of life. And so when things get undramatic, interestingly, as may happen as you start on a spiritual path, as may happen when you get into actually a healthy relationship, suddenly things are not dramatic. And for those of us who are addicted to drama, that can feel really boring. Oh my God. Like, if we're not going to fight, what are we going to do? If there isn't that tension, if there isn't the jealousy, if there's not we get bored. And so a lot of us change course in our life simply because we are bored. Right? It's that sense of like, oh, tired of my toothpaste. I've actually heard people say, I need to try a different brand of shampoo. I'm tired of this one. You think, really? Tired of your toothpaste? Like, how would you get tired of your toothpaste or tired of your shampoo if there weren't something within you that was in general bored and needed even the basest form of variety in order to just make it through the day? Otherwise, people use the same brand of toothpaste forever. If it works, why bother changing it? If your shampoo works, why change it unless you discover that it's, being tested on animals or cruel in some other way, or you discover that the company is, being funded by the tobacco industry or something. But other than that, there's no reason to change unless we have this. So unless we have that craving for drama, we're not going to change the course of our life. We're only going to do that either because I've gotten an intuition, a deep inner knowing, which is grace, or because I'm craving drama. And it's really important to understand that before you make a shift in your life. If you don't feel like you're making a shift because there has been a deep awareness of grace, of intuition, of intelligence, of knowing, stay put. Stay put. There may be an important lesson for you to learn there. Restlessness in the mind is a problem to be overcome. It's not a signal to listen to. A lot of us keep moving our bodies, moving our lives, moving our jobs, moving our relationships, moving our homes because our minds are restless. And if we can just keep moving the body, it makes us not work, not have to look at the restlessness of the mind. It's why in meditation the first thing we're told is, sit still. Sit still. Yeah, the mind is going to be restless. It's why it doesn't work so well to meditate while you're jogging in place. It's what a lot of people want to do. I can't sit still. Sit still anyway. The mind is always restless. Sit still. So if you're making a shift in your life that's just out of a need for drama, don't. If it doesn't feel like there is grace or ease in it, stay put. But if you're making a shift that's real, that's due to an inner awareness, grace is already there. There may not be ease, because ease is not a product of just my internal world. Ease is a product of the external world. And a lot of times when we make shifts in our lives, people in our lives don't want that. We get a lot of pushback. I experienced it when I decided to move to India 27 years ago. Everyone I know who has made any kind of a life decision, life choice that isn't exactly in alignment with what our culture tells them to do is going to get some kind of pushback. Some kind of pushback. Some of us will make it anyway. Some don't. One of the reasons that my mom finally had this beautiful, beautiful courage to support the decision that I made to move to India was because when she was young, in her 20s, she had wanted to join the Peace Corps. And her father had convinced her that if she went away for 2 years to join the Peace Corps, all the good men would be gone by the time she got back. She was, 22, 23, maybe 24. And her father convinced her not to go. That if you go, there won't be any good men left by the time you get back. And so she stayed. But didn't want that to happen to me. And so she was able eventually, after the initial rebellious phase, she was able to find that courage in herself, to support me, to make there be more ease in the decision I was making. Because she didn't want to do to me what her father had done to her. But typically there's always a lot of pushback. Any decision we make that's not in exact line with kind of the status quo, the culture saying, get this degree, get this job, make this amount of money, marry in this way, have a home in that way, do this, there's going to be pushback. There's not always going to be ease. So I wouldn't require ease. If you look at a butterfly coming out of a cocoon, or a baby chick hatching out of an egg, or a baby being born from a woman's womb, you'd never use the word ease to describe that. Ask any woman who's ever given birth what it was like, and they could throw out 100 words, and easy would not be amongst them. There's grace. She may not feel graceful in the moment, but there's the power of grace. My God, new life is coming forth. But it's not ease. So don't look for ease. Look for grace and look for truth. Ease eventually will come, but don't expect it to be part of the shift. Nothing was born in ease. Seeds crack and break. Eggs crack and break. Cocoons crack and break. Women go into labor that is called labor for a reason. It's not ease, but it's grace, and it's truth. So if your choice is that, ease eventually will come, but it may be a very long time later, so don't necessarily look for it. Any questions that anyone here has? Any questions? Yeah, sure. He's just bringing you the mic. With expectations?
We do from others.
How do we deal with our expectations from others?
They won't get fulfilled.
Expectations that others have of us or that we have of them? We have them of other people. So, Puja Swamiji always says, expectation is the mother of frustration. Acceptance is the mother of ease and peace and joy. So the only way to deal with expectations that we have of others is through what we would call Jnana Yoga. Right? We speak frequently about different paths to the divine. Path of devotion, bhakti. Path of action, karma. Path of wisdom, jnana. This is a Jnana Yoga path, meaning it's a path of deep introspection. This is actually something that your mind is going to be your friend in helping you do this. Let's say that I have an expectation that you're going to be on time. Okay? I'll give you another personal example. So, when I was growing up, every day my mom would say to my dad in the morning, "What time are you coming home?" My dad would say, let's say 7 o'clock. Sometimes it was 6, sometimes it was 6:30, sometimes it was 7, depending on work. But let's say he said 7 o'clock that day. By 6:45, by 6:45, my mother was already at the window saying, "Where is he? Where is he?" Because her expectation was that he should not only be on time, but he should be early. She was someone to whom time management was very important. And 7, you learned with her, 7 actually means 6:30. By 6:45, you're already late. Now, that expectation caused her a lot of distress. Because to my dad, 7 o'clock meant 7, 7:10, 7:15, maybe even 7:20. Like, there's traffic sometimes. You have to stop for gas sometimes. Life happens. It caused her a lot of stress. I remember being young and standing by the window with her saying, "It's okay, Mom, it's okay. He's coming, he'll be here." Now, this is really something that all of us in our lives have to say to ourselves. Is it worth it? Is the expectation worth the stress? If I expect that you're going to be home at 7 o'clock, if you and I are married and I expect that you're going to be home at 7 o'clock, and you run late every single day, but every day I expect you're going to be there on time, I'm going to be stressed and miserable. And so I have to ask myself, just through a pure path of introspection, Jnana Yoga, is it worth it? What am I achieving? What's my ultimate goal here? Is my goal to have some reason to be able to be miserable? Or is my goal to live in peace? Is my goal to be happy? Is my goal to be free? So whatever you're expecting of someone, you've got to ask yourself, is it worth it? If I expect that everyone is going to like me, and everyone is going to be nice to me, and everyone's going to respect me, and no one is going to say anything bad about me, well, I'm setting myself up for misery. Because it's impossible that everyone's going to like me. It's impossible everyone's going to respect me. It's impossible, especially in a place like India, that nobody's going to say anything bad about me. It just goes completely against the fabric of society. But if I expect that, then I'm setting myself up to be miserable. And so every time I find out someone doesn't like me, or someone doesn't respect me, or someone said something nasty, I feel hurt. And eventually you say to yourself, what am I doing here? Is this worth it? Why do I need every single person on the planet to like me in order for me to be happy? Why do I need you to come home at 7 o'clock? Like, why? Why is 7 o'clock objectively a much happier time than 7:15? Is it possible that I could shift my vision of 7:15 to being a happy time? Of course I can. Is it possible that I could recognize that in the same way that different people like different foods and prefer different flowers and enjoy vacationing in different places and enjoy different music, that they're going to enjoy different people? Of course it's possible. But I have to be prepared to do that if my ultimate goal is peace. When we hold on to expectations, we have to be very clear that I am not working toward peace, because this expectation itself is keeping me from it. So ask yourself very clearly, if you find that you're stuck with expectations, just ask yourself clearly, like, is it worth it? What am I gaining from this? And you'll find, hopefully, that it's not worth it, and you let it go. Or lastly, and then we'll come to you, lastly, you may hold an expectation, but not necessarily feel entitled to it being fulfilled. For example, in order for us to sit right here where we are sitting in this moment, we have to have the expectation that the dam that was built in Teri was built well, and that it isn't about to break and have 800 meters of water come pouring toward us, sweeping away all of Rishikesh. We have to have that expectation, or we couldn't sit here. When we go to sleep at night, we have to have the expectation that we're going to wake up in the morning, that our loved ones are going to wake up in the morning, that the contractor who built our home, the architect who designed it, did a good job, and The ceiling's not going to collapse on me while I sleep. If we don't have that expectation, we'd never go to sleep. So we have to have some expectations. I have to expect that my loved ones are not going to betray me. That I'm not going to be cheated on, lied to, abused, harmed, betrayed. Otherwise, it's really hard to open our hearts and trust. So there are some expectations that we really can't get around if we're going to navigate our way and live our way happy and trusting in the world. But we have to recognize that just because I expect that the dam was built well, and I expect that my home was built well, and I expect that my loved ones will be there in the morning, and I expect that they will not betray me, that doesn't actually make me entitled for it to be true. There are people who are betrayed and abused and cheated on. There are people whose ceiling does fall on them while they sleep. There are people who have been washed away by rivers, who have died in natural disasters. So there's some element of expectation that we do hold, but we hold it with kind of a light grip, with the awareness that, yes, I need this expectation in order to walk through my life. But I don't actually feel so entitled to it happening that when a loved one does die, or if my house does burn down, I don't feel, in addition to the sadness or the anger, I don't feel betrayed by the universe. I don't feel like I've somehow been single-handedly picked out for bad luck. But I recognize, yeah, it was an expectation. I held it. Didn't come true. As it turns out, I didn't really have any entitlement to expect that because things happen. It's the only way around it. Otherwise, you suffer your whole life. Yes.
Is expectation and the hope, how different it is?
The difference between hope and expectation. They're vastly different. They're vastly different. But they can both lead to misery, depending on how tightly they're held. Expectation, I would say, is much, much, much stronger hope. Hope is, oh, it's my birthday tomorrow, we have a picnic. God, I really hope it doesn't rain. But if my birthday's in the middle of the rainy season, I may hope it doesn't rain, but if I'm intelligent, I'm going to be really aware that it very well might, and I'm going to have a rain plan. For me to have an expectation that it won't rain on my picnic in the middle of the rainy season is setting myself up for misery. So they're in the same spectrum. Typically, expectations cause more pain because typically when we have a hope, we realize, it might happen, it might not, but I sure hope it does. I hope they have my favorite flavor ice cream. Right? I hope my football team wins. We have a lot of hopes. But when they don't happen, we're usually not miserable. It's the expectations that make us miserable. Good. Other questions? Yes.
How do we get rid of the negative thoughts that keep coming? At the same time, I am not sure that's a negative thought or positive thought.
How to get rid of the negative thoughts that keep coming, and also how at the same time to even be sure if something is a negative thought or a positive thought. In general, negative thoughts make us contract. We feel smaller. I'll give you a few examples so you know what I mean. I hate them. Right? Even my face contracts, right? But your heart contracts, the body contracts. I hate them. Nobody ever says, I hate them. I mean, you just wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it. If you were a choreographer of a stage play or a drama and you had some character with the line, I hate them, you would never say, oh, and while you're saying that line, I want you to do this. Because the audience would say, that makes no sense. I hate them. Nobody talks like that. Right? You'd say, very amateur actor. I hate them. We contract. Or we say, nothing good happens to me. Everything bad happens to me. I'm worthless. I'm useless. I contract. You see my face, my body, my heart. I contract. I know you don't love me. I know you don't love me. See, again, I'm all contracted. I'm like folding it. Negativity causes us to contract in our minds, in our hearts, and actually in our bodies. If you study body language, which I have not studied on any kind of expert level, but even just on a basic level, negativity causes contraction. Positivity causes expansion. And this is true, by the way, even if it's not so full in the body, it's very true in the mind. If you say things like, those people, if I'm thinking negative about a group of people of that color, that race, that religion, those people, well, my body might not have contracted, but my mind has contracted because now I've created this box of us versus them. We've contracted, us versus them. When does that happen? Usually with fear. We saw it a lot during COVID. Different religions blaming each other for super spreader events. Different people blaming each other. People who are getting vaccinated are causing this, people not getting vaccinated are causing that. It was just nothing but polarization. We were each building boxes that got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller with each day as we pushed more and more people as other away. Fear is a negative thought in that way. So it causes, when there is fear, there is contraction. We contract into us versus them. It happens in war. Even if you don't have any particular animosity against the other side, you're going to contract into us in a time of war simply out of fear. We're seeing this happen in so much of the world today. Even if people on the ground in Israel or in Palestine didn't necessarily, prior to this, have any borders or boundaries. The most open-minded, open-hearted, interfaith, oneness, peace-loving people. Well, you put people in a situation where they are in fear of their lives, and that fear causes contraction. And it's why we see even more division. I remember talking to someone a few years ago who had lived in the former Yugoslavia, and was telling me about how when the war broke out, how people who had been best friends, next door neighbors forever, never thought on the basis of race or religion, suddenly were bordering their doors up against each other, like using the big locks and literally boards to close their doors against each other in fear. Because suddenly when there is threat of violence, threat of harm, threat of lack, we contract. So the way to know if a feeling is positive or negative is notice how it makes you feel. Do you feel expansive? Does your sense of I and we expand, or does it contract? Does your heart expand or contract? Does your mind expand or contract? Does your body expand or contract? And that'll let you know. And then how to deal with the negative thoughts. A lot of ways. The first way is just to notice them and to recognize they're just a thought. We give our thoughts a lot more credit than they're really due. Thoughts are critical when they lead to action, but if we're able to be simply mindful of the fluctuations of the mind, there's anger. There's greed. Isn't that interesting? There's jealousy. Look at that. Wow. Hi, jealousy. If we're able to just notice them, they actually go away quite quickly and there isn't really much we need to do. If you've ever tried to watch your thoughts, what you find is it's so hard because they keep changing. Our thoughts move at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So you have a negative one, by the time you even realize it's a negative one, it's gone. So one way is just don't pay attention to them. Don't let them get you down. Recognize it. That's fear. Okay. I'm going to exhale. I'm going to open. Quite literally, I'm going to just open my arms like this, which is very difficult to do if I'm really afraid. And so interestingly, one of the beautiful ways of just dealing with fear is just open your arms as wide as you can. Because it's literally, it opens your heart, and you cannot, or at least I cannot, and I've tried, cannot simultaneously hold this pose and be really afraid at the same time. So sometimes actually just changing the body. I remember when I was in university and I was always very, very stressed, and I would go to yoga class. My yoga teacher would see me. He could see in my eyes that I was not in good shape, and immediately would just have me do a whole bunch of back bends. Back bend after back bend after back bend after back bend. And as my chest, physically, there was no therapy. He didn't say a word to me other than again, again, again. It was the only word he said. But somehow, in the constant opening of the chest, the fear, the stress, the negativity, the tension, the self-hatred, the doubt, all of that, it disappeared. And after each one, he'd look in my eyes to check, like, was I okay? And he would just literally have me do them. He'd stand in front of me, he'd put 2 fingers behind my back and push. And I'd go down and catch myself, and then he'd pull me back up, and he'd push me again, back up, down, up, down, up. Finally, he'd look in my eye and say, all right, you're okay, join the rest of the class. So sometimes it's literally that easy. Open your heart. Sometimes it requires giving the mind something else to do. Where it goes negative, go positive. And I don't mean Pollyanna kind of superficial level, everything is roses and rainbows. But if you're with a person and you're thinking negatively about that person, just force the mind to start thinking of something positive about them. It may be how they look, it may be how they speak, it may be something they're wearing, but just force the mind to focus on something positive about that person instead of what's negative about them. Similarly, if it's about yourself, if you find it's a lot of self-negativity, just force the mind to be positive about the self. To be positive, to be positive. And sometimes just give it a mantra. Just get it chanting your mantra. So that rather than shifting between negative and positive, you just work to still the mind altogether. You just work to quiet the thoughts altogether. So that by God's grace you may actually find a moment in between the thoughts. So those are all different ways of working with the negativity depending on what it's about, how severe it is, how persistent it is. But keep working with it. You can overcome it. It's just the nature of the mind. And just lastly, it's worth mentioning, negativity is actually evolutionarily advantageous, which is why we have it. It's why we have it. We are the descendants of the ones who were pessimists, who were anxiety-filled, who were worried. Being happy, if you think about it from a purely Darwinian evolutionary standpoint, being happy does not necessarily mean you're going to breed more children and therefore pass on more of your DNA. But being nervous does, because you're much more likely to avoid a life-threatening situation. You're much more likely not to take risks. So your life may not be very happy at all, but you're much more likely to pass on DNA. So we are here as the descendants of the ones who said, I bet a wild elephant is going to come in the night. Somebody better stand guard. I bet a wild elephant is going to come and try to tear down our house. We better build from something stronger than thatch. I bet the warring tribe is going to come and try to kill us in the night. We better sleep with our bows and arrows. We are their descendants because everyone else got killed. They are the ones who actually lived long enough to procreate. So it's important to realize that the reason the nature of the mind is negative is because evolutionarily, on a purely physical standpoint, our physical evolution doesn't care if we attain enlightenment. It doesn't care if we're miserable. All it cares is that we procreate and pass on our DNA. One point agenda, have babies. Spiritual evolution is something completely different. But our brain and our body is formed not based on our spiritual evolution, but based on our physical evolution. So the reason that the mind has this tendency toward negativity is because evolutionarily that has actually served us. They've done studies, scientific, psychological studies that show that pessimists are actually right much more frequently than optimists. But optimists are much happier. And so we have a choice in our life when we choose kind of how are we going to be. Would you rather be right more frequently? Yeah, it is kind of likely this guy's going to cheat you. Yeah, it is probably likely that, somebody's going to try to come in and steal what you've got? Would you rather be right? Or would you rather be happy? I'd rather be happy. And if it means that every once in a while I get taken advantage of, so be it. I'd much rather that than spend my life assuming everyone's going to take advantage of me and be miserable. But as we're thinking about this optimism, pessimism situation, it's interesting to realize that actually pessimists are correct more frequently than optimists. Again, which is why it is the default mechanism of the brain. Because if they're correct more, when the world is a threat, they're much more likely to pass on their DNA. So understand that's the nature of your brain, the nature of your mind. But you can overcome it. Because we are not looking to just have babies and pass on DNA. We're looking for enlightenment. We're looking for moksha. We're looking for liberation. We're looking for God realization. And so we have to be able to swim literally up current against that which may have been physically, evolutionarily advantageous for our ancestors. And you can do it. It just takes attention and intention. Wonderful. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening, everyone. I look so forward to being together tomorrow, and so much love to you all.